Okay, welcome everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. It's 1:30. We've got about 17 people on the call with us this afternoon. Thanks to everyone for joining, and I'm sure we'll probably have a few people hop on as we go. So we're going to go ahead and get to it. Today's agenda, really cool presentation from Alex Onisco about a new species that's being found and spreading in Central Florida. So we're looking forward to hearing about that. And we'll also have a Cooperative Invasive Species Management Area update from the Nature Coast CISMA. Just a brief introduction. I'm Emily Bell. I'm with the Florida Invasive Species Partnership, and we host these monthly CISMA calls. The partnership helps to facilitate partners across the state who have any kind of role in managing or dealing with invasive species, and we also help to support the network of CISMAs statewide. So just real quick, and this is the last month, I can take this slide out next time, but I'm relatively new. I came on board in April. So I'm the new Florida Invasive Species Partnership Coordinator, as I mentioned. I also have a role within US IFAS, helping to do some invasive species coordination work there. So if you have a CISMA email list or really any other invasive species related list you'd like to add me to, just to keep me in the loop, please do that. And like I said, I can yank this slide next time, but just for my third call with you guys, so just wanted to get that reminder out there. And then with that, let's go ahead and dive in to our presenter. And if you just give me a moment, I'm going to make sure they have control of the screen. All right, Alex, you should be good to go.
Okay. I'm going to try to get this going. There we go. So, yeah, as Emily said, my name is Alex Onisco, and I'll be presenting actually on 2 new Scleria species found. So you kind of get a twofer on this one. And I work for South Florida Water Management District, but I'll also be researching 3 species of Scleria as part of a master's program with the University of Florida. So we'll get into it. Just bear with me. These controls can be a little bit slow. Keep it down arrow. And I do have the group chat open on my screen, so if you have any questions as I'm going along, feel free to type them in there, and I'll try to glance over at that and answer any questions that do come up. Oh, there we go. So just to give you a brief overview of Scleria, in Florida, we have 13 species, non-native. One of the 4 is a Category 1 invasive, and actually Scleria microcarpa just got voted by the FLEPC Plant Committee list to become a Category 1 invasive species on the next, I think it's 2019 list that they put out. So the 2 species I'm going to talk to you about today are undergoing invasion risk assessments through the University of Florida. And the 4th non-native species of Scleria has only been found in Broward County. I believe it's been actively managed, and it hasn't popped up outside of those county boundaries since the 1970s. So we'll start with Scleria microcarpa. This is commonly called tropical nutrush, but since this is a perennial sedge species, I tend not to use the common name, so we'll just stick with Latin terms. This is non-native to Florida. It's distributed through the tropical Americas, and actually finding any sort of document that says, you know, truly native or not native has been a little bit difficult, a little challenging, but we know it's not the first time it's been documented on the continental U.S., although it is close by in Puerto Rico and Cuba, where it is considered native. This species was first seen on the landscape around the Kissimmee chain of lakes in 2007, but it wasn't positively identified until 2015, when land managers really started noticing it making dense stands in the understory of cypress, maple, and some mixed hardwood swamps. So as I mentioned, the range is primarily along the Kissimmee chain of lakes, as far as we know. It's been vouchered in Polk and Osceola counties, and then I have a specimen from Orange County sitting in my press waiting to be sent out. So the map should look like that soon, and it'll be vouchered in 3 counties. And then I have a second map here that shows the positive identifications or positive observations of Scleria microcarpa so far in Florida. And you can see it's really condensed down there around Lake Hatchinahaw. I believe that's Lake Rosalie and Tiger Lake. Lake Kissimmee State Park also has some larger populations, and it was recently found up in Reedy Creek in Orange County. And you can see something I'm interested in looking at is that big gap between the most northern point and then down at DWP and Lake Hatchinahaw. There's a big swath of cypress and the typical habitat where we would find the species that hasn't, to my knowledge, been surveyed yet. Probably get some money that we could find Scleria microcarpa in there. So I don't know for certain how this species is getting around, but as an invasive species biologist, I do want to point my finger at the birds and blame them. There is some literature out there, and it's more focused on endangered species like the Florida grasshopper sparrow and important game species like quail that do document these birds using native Scleria as a foraging. And I just think that these birds wouldn't necessarily discriminate against using Scleria microcarpa as a food source just because it's not native. There's also documents of ants using Scleria as a food source and taking it into their nest. And then people, we end up moving a lot of invasive species around. The picture on the left is actually an ATV trail that someone decided to put in, a member of the public decided to put in through a pretty dense stand of microcarpa. And when this picture was taken, these plants were in seed, and it hadn't been too long before that ATV had gone through that trail. So it's easy to see those seeds getting stuck in equipment. The seeds are tiny and get stuck in footwear and stuck by airboats. So today I really want to get you guys kind of keyed in on how to identify Scleria microcarpa. That way we have more eyes out in the field looking for the species and trying to figure out the extent of the population range.
Okay.
So where we start, as far as the taxonomic key goes, you need to start with the seeds, or achenes as they're called, in sedges. Okay. But since we don't necessarily want seed production in the field, I'm going to give you, I'll give you some skills to identify this plant while it's in its vegetative state. So we'll start at the leaves. The leaves are pleated, and if you were to cut a leaf and
sorry to jump in. Give me just a minute. I'm gonna do something here. Let's see.
Probably have to bring it.
Yes. And then. Okay, Alex, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, great. Go ahead. Sorry, we just had some noise background happening, so I muted everyone but you. So go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
It's okay. So vegetative characteristics and how to identify the species in the field without the seeds. That'll be key. So looking at the leaves, pleated, and at the cross section, they'll be either W or M shaped, and that at least will get you into knowing that this is a sedge. A lot of sedges share that characteristic. The leaves are also covered in forward and backward teeny tiny spines, so that'll be a dead giveaway. The plant is sharp or cutting, and it will cut you, so that's a fun part of working with this species. A main giveaway is going to be that the leaf sheaths are decurrent, which just means that the sheath is wider than the stem and extends down the stem past the base of the leaf. And then if anybody is familiar with identifying grass species and looking for ligules, sedges have a contraligule. And I'm trying to pull up a picture of it for you, but basically where you would pull back a grass leaf and look at the inside of it, you would, there we go. You would look at the front of the leaf, and then again, that's another good angle of that decurrent leaf sheath running down. But where the orange arrow is pointing, that's called a contraligule, and it'll be lanceolate, and it's a good indicator that this is Scleria microcarpa. The 3 invasive Sclerias that I've been looking at all have somewhat distinct contraligules. Scleria microcarpa also has rhizomes, and like I mentioned before, the seeds are tiny and exposed, and they kind of look like acorns. They're only about 1 or 2 millimeters long. So I'm just going to go through seedlings, small plants, and mature plants and try to give you keys on how to identify those. So this is a picture on the left-hand side of just a carpet of Scleria microcarpa seedlings. And by the end of this talk, I don't necessarily think you'll be able to identify that at first glance, but something that's kind of unique about Scleria species in general is that once they germinate and sprout, they tend to hold on to their seed. The roots hold on to that seed coating. And if you gently pull up the seedlings, you can oftentimes see the seed still attached to the roots. And since the seed is really what you need to start keying out this species as far as Wonderland goes, then you have your seed and you don't necessarily have to worry about waiting for these plants to become adults and risking them producing more seeds before you have a chance to treat them. So the picture on the right shows a small seedling with the seed still attached to the root. And then with small immature plants and larger mature plants, again, the best way to identify these without the seeds is going to be those vegetative characteristics, the winged leaf sheath and the lanceolate contraligule. And then we'll move on to the seeds. Like I've been saying, the most important characteristic to positively identify the species is going to be the seed head. And seeds, I don't know if I mentioned, are called achenes in the sedge family, but really you can use the two terms interchangeably. I'm trying to use both just to get you guys to end up doing some research or looking at taxonomic keys. You'll see some of these words that you may not recognize at first glance. But the seeds are tiny, the flowers are really tiny too, and you can see the picture on the left-hand side. There's a flower circled, and it's not the typical flower you think of. It doesn't have showy petals or anything like that. It's basically reduced to just scales, anthers, and a style. So reproductive parts and little scales. And these seeds are going to come out. It looks like it's a spike, but it's actually several individual panicles coming from the base of the uppermost 2 or 3 leaves. And these are prolific seeders. They produce an enormous amount of seeds. When you're in the through, it's just pretty impressive to see that. So now I wanted to give you guys a little bit of a size reference, since we're not in the field and you can't really tell exactly how large these plants are. Scleria microcarpa tends to grow to be about 3.5, maybe 4 feet, but I've generally seen it stopping at about 3.5 feet. So the picture on the left is a coworker of mine, and he's probably about 6'2", and he's just in a dense stand of Scleria microcarpa. And then on the right is Cody, and she's probably about 5'3", 5'4". Sorry if I'm wrong, Cody, and you're on the call. But just giving you guys an idea of what it's going to look like out in the field if you do come across infestations of this plant. And here are a few examples of the habitats that you'll typically carp in, and it does seem to be confined to the shade. One thing that worries me is that I have found herbarium specimens from Central America that have notes on them, like that they're finding the species in an open marsh or in roadside ditches. That hasn't been the case so far in Florida. We've really seen it just sticking to the shade, and it'll even go right to the edge of a cypress forest, and the forest may open up into a marsh, but the Scleria stops there, right at the edge. So you can see all these different habitats. They're shaded. It's either cypress, maple, or a mixture of maple and various hardwoods or cabbage palms. And these plants can deal with a variety of hydro periods, so it can be inundated or dry, but it's typically a forested wetland where you're going to find these species. So if you're out in the woods walking around and you see just small patches of a suspicious looking grass-like plant, take a second look. It could be Scleria microcarpa if you're in a shaded hardwood area. And this is the best time, and really, if you are unfortunate enough to have this species on your property, this is the stage you want to find it in, because anecdotally from the land managers I've spoken to in the KCOL, in a matter of 7 to 10 years, these patchy infestations can become really dense stands of Scleria microcarpa, just taking over the understory. So Lake Hashtanaha is managed by South Florida Water Management District, and pretty much the entire perimeter and cypress fringe of this lake has Scleria microcarpa. DWP, Disney Wilderness Preserve, which is the purplish polygon on the map on the left-hand side of the screen, they also have Scleria microcarpa, but they left out, and it's more of those patchy infestations along the lakeshore that they manage. So 2015, the district realized they had this invasive non-native species and wanted to start doing something to treat it. So through a partnership with FWC, there was discussion about what herbicides to test could even kill the species in an effort to manage it. So the district ended up putting out 9 trial plots and spraying five different herbicides and then mixtures of them. So I just want to comment that this, I have out new herbicide trials using different chemicals. Some are more selective. We're hoping that we'll get some good results with some of those more selective herbicides. But looking at this, we ended up testing glyphosate, 2,4-D, Flumi, Clearcast, and Triclopyr, and our best results were with the 2% glyphosate alone. So we moved forward, and through district funding and FWC funding, EVRR, and then through their program, we put out some large-scale treatments around Lake Hatchinaha. So this was the first of them, using 2% glyphosate. We had contractors go out and walk the area. This was when it was dry, and it was actually probably about 2.5, 3 months before Irma hit that we got these treatments out. And the result of the treatments was 95% control. The plants were dead all the way down to the roots. There was some resprouting. I'm not sure if it was just bad herbicide coverage or perhaps kind of the summer afternoon rains were setting in. I do remember the contractors calling and letting us know they got rained out a couple of days. But our new challenge was that we had an explosion of seedlings in these treatment areas. And so that to treat these seedlings and to keep them from turning into mature plants that can produce seeds and start the process all over again. So here are just a few photos from the results of those treatments. And in the top left picture, that used to be a truly dense stand of just Scleria, microcarpa. And you can tell it's brown, it's dead, it's gone. So remember, we put these treatments out, Irma hit, the water came way up, so the plants were hit with herbicide, and then they had several feet of water sitting on top of them. And I think that double whammy effect was probably really beneficial to us. The picture on the top right is shows the water line. The top arrow is pointing to the water line on a cypress tree, and the bottom arrow is pointing at a machete to give you a little bit of a size reference. And the bottom picture, bottom left, is that kind of carpet of seedlings. This isn't everywhere, but it is pretty common throughout the entire treatment area that we have just these patches of carpeted seedlings. And then the bottom right picture is just some of that Scleria microcarpa resprouting from the rhizomes. So as I've been, following along with these treatments and studying these species, some of the observations I've made in the field is that this species is producing flowers and seeds between May and November. So actually right now is a good time to be out there looking for it. And if you happen to be along the KCOL, you can see plants feeding right now and how to identify the species. The seedlings seem to be abundant pretty much all the time. I need to get out there kind of during the summer months, but I have a feeling that they're just going to be covered in water. But I am interested to know if we can drown these seedlings out or not. And one other thing I noticed was that these plants didn't seem to be affected by the 2 summer droughts we had. The longer one in, what would it be, 2017, and then that short drought we had just this summer. So if you've seen Scleria microcarpa, I definitely would encourage you to report your sightings on NMAPs. I had made this Scleria microcarpa data sheet and distributed it, but I never got any back. So I think it's just use EDMAP and try to note, the life stage you're seeing the plants in, the reproductive stage, what habitat, and any hydrological information when you do find these infestations. And then, like I said, remember, these seeds are tiny and they can get stuck in the tread of your footwear. Even rubber boots will get stuck in. So just be careful and be vigilant and make sure that we're not the vectors spreading this around, and the land managers and the contractors that have been working with this species and with me are tired of hearing me ask them to check the bottom of their shoes, and they finish my sentence for me. So I'm trying to drill that into everyone's head. So what's next for Scleria microcarpa? And I may have just titled this page Alex's to-do list with Scleria microcarpa, because I need to work on doing some more research, looking into how this plant behaves in its native ranges, or at least where it is found. We have put out replicate herbicide trials, and we've taken some herbicides out and added some new ones. We're testing 10 different herbicides. Some are selective, and one is a sedge-specific herbicide that we're hoping will be able to target the sedges and not impact the natives so much, the grasses and lizard's tail and rushes that are often found in these same habitats as the microcarpa. Part of me giving these talks and trying to teach other land managers and biologists how to identify this species is because I really need help with presence and absence surveys. I can only cover so much ground, so with a lot of eyes out there, species of plant, and reporting it when they do find it would be a huge help. So more information about just the life cycle, the habitat, probably some of those trigger points for germination, and all of that leading to developing treatment recommendations that are effective and efficient and aren't too costly in dollar amount and to our native species. So that's pretty much it for Scleria microcarpa. I do want to introduce you to another Scleria species, Scleria egersiana, and you may be thinking identification of 2 new species in one day and from a PowerPoint. Well, this is kind of a 2-for-1, and these species are and have some of the same vegetative attributes to help you identify them. So the main difference is that Scleria egersiana is a lot like microcarpa, except think of it as like the bigger brother who's going to the gym all the time and is huge. Because this plant gets to be about 9 feet as opposed to microcarpa growing to 3.5 feet tall. So Egger's nut rush, again, a bad common name for a sedge species. So I'll stick to saying Scleria egersiana, is another perennial sedge, non-native to Florida, also distributed through the tropical Americas. And this species wasn't identified until 2017, so just short of a year ago. And found in Hendry County at OK Slough State Forest, and it's another one that's pretty much confined to the shade of cypress, although we do have some individual plants that are in full sun. They just don't seem to be as healthy, as robust. They're yellowing, and I'm not sure if they're going to produce viable seed or just be successful in that open, sunny area. But we are finding them growing in the full sun. So there's a picture of Scleria egersiana. It's kind of hard to take good pictures of these species. They're not super photogenic as far as looking at it on a larger scale. Up close, it's not an issue, but some people say that it looks like Phragmites as you're walking by, or even like corn. So how to identify the species? Again, usually you need the seeds. And actually, I don't think either of these species are in Wonderland's taxonomic key. So, but if you're trying to see if you have a native or not, you still have to start at the Achenes. So again, look for that pleated W or M-shaped leaf. This is also going to be armed with spines forward and backward facing, kind of like you need a hand lens to see these silica-based spines, but you will feel them right away. It's almost like these plants are like Velcro on your pants. But that decurrent leaf in the picture on the far right is a really good example of the leaf sheath being wider than the stem and going below the point of attachment. These have some funky kind of fused in the next slide. That have a contraligule as well, and this one can be triangular or it can be a little lanceolate. So a fun thing about botany is sometimes, never, always, different words like that. Plants are just variable, but I'll digress. And this species also has very triangular stems, large rhizomes, and the canes look really similar to microcarpa, except they're more inflated, they're bigger, like 3 or 4 millimeters opposed to 1 to 2 millimeters. So they're, you know, large for a Scleria species, and they're more roundish. So just an example of that really triangular stem filled with parenchyma tissue, which just indicates that this is a wetland plant. The picture, the next has that fused leaf tip. And then the last picture on the far right is again the contraligule, except this time, instead of being triangular, it's kind of a mix between triangular and lanceolate. Some examples of the large rhizomes. It's a large woody rhizome, something that makes me a little nervous and makes me think it may be difficult to control with herbicides, especially since it's growing along with cypress. But the Florida Forest Service has treated some of this. They've used glyphosate alone, and we dug up the rhizomes and they were dead. So I believe they have applied for an FWC EDRR project and are looking to treat this species. They have, I believe it's less than 40 acres in the forest. But we do know that this species is producing landscape because we're finding seedlings, small plants, and mature seed-producing plants. So again, if you see Scleria agriceon out there, definitely report it on EDMAP, get the word out, record some different information for us. And then my last little pitch is that it is Scleria season, so Scleria lacustris is either coming up or it's up in a lot of natural areas. This is a Flexi Category 1 species. It's different from the other 2 Scleria species I've been talking about since it's an annual. So it's really important to treat this species when it comes up and before it goes to seed. So I could do another whole 30-minute talk on this, but instead I'll direct you to an EDIT publication where you can learn a whole lot more about rice nut rush, Scleria lacustris, and how to treat it if you do have it on your properties. So I'd like to thank all the cooperators who have helped me with this research and who are still helping me, and then TNC, I forgot their logo, but we do have some plots out at DWP. So with that, I'm not sure if I have time for questions. Maybe we can stay after, but I'll let Emily kind of take it back.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. That was a great presentation. From my perspective, from someone who's a plant enthusiast, but certainly not a botanist, I know I learned a lot. And I do know that grasses are always fun and exciting to learn how to ID. So let me just get the key control back. And we do have a few minutes for questions, definitely. So I muted everyone. If you have a question, just know that you're probably muted. So unmute yourself and we can see if anyone has a few. So any questions?
Yeah, if not, I'll assume you all know how to identify the species and feel very comfortable and are experts. But if you do have questions. I'd be happy. You can email me or call me.
I have a question. This is Dia. Can you hear me?
Hey, Dia.
Hey, what's up? Are you planning on doing any testing to determine any dispersal mechanisms to see if the birds are actually moving these things around?
I've been playing around with that idea. I've had reports of people saying they see birds, you know, eating the seeds and stuff, but I really need to get together with like an ornithologist maybe and talk to them about how I could set something like that up.
Like perch
I assume
traps
it
or
would
something and collect the poo would be what I would think.
What was that?
If you could set up perch traps, like set up perches where you would
yeah,
and collect their I don't know what you call scat for a bird, but just collect their droppings
scat.
and do a germination test.
Yeah. Well, that could be easy to do. Thank you for that suggestion. But yeah, I would like to know how these are getting around, and I think just like being in the field and walking around when there's actually water on the ground, I have seen the seeds floating around on the surface of the water, but if you grab like a handful and drop them, some sink, some float. I don't know if that has a correlation with viability or not, or maybe that is a fun dispersal mechanism where all the seed are afloat so that they can go further and some sink. But I have seen both, and then also I think that they do float because we find them germinating either like on the water at the water line of cypress knees or on like logs that from fallen trees will be on the surface of those too.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anybody else? Any other?
Yes.
Yep, go ahead.
It's Chris Lockhart. I thank you for asking. One of my questions was going to be if it floats, so thank you for answering that. But I also was curious, where is this webinar going to be posted online for future reference?
Yes, absolutely. So this webinar will be posted online. I believe I have the link at the end of the slideshow, but you can access it through the FISC website, and I will make sure with everybody as well.
Thank you.
Okay, so any other questions? If not, we'll move on to our CISMA updates. And again, you can always email Alex, or you can shoot me an email if you have a question, and I can contact her as well. So today we're going to get an update from Nature Coast CISMA. Bob, do we have you on the call? And don't forget, I muted everyone, so you may have to unmute yourself if you're here.
Hey, this is Ryan from Nature Coast. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Ryan. Welcome. Thank you for calling in.
Yeah, Bob forgot that this is today, so he's out in the Rich Loam Green Swamp area treating some weed or other. So I'm going to try and do this for him if that works.
No problem. Thanks so much.
Happy to. Okay, so I'm our outreach chair here with the Coochie State Forest. Our counties are Pasco, Hernando, Sumter, and Citrus, as you can see. We've been work days for NESAW. We had one in each of our 4 counties, which were pretty good, between 7 to 12 people in each one. We've been trying to expand our membership. We created a Facebook page recently. We've been networking with our local native plant societies. We've been trying to reach some youth groups, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, that kind of thing. We're struggling with the outreach. We're trying to get better at it, especially with the social media is helping a lot, because we'd been having trouble updating our older website, the FISP website. None of us were very savvy, and Facebook seemed easier. And we've been getting some new recruits, which has been good. One thing Bob did want me to mention is we are trying to put together a grass ID workshop, which requires microscopes, which we don't have. So we're trying to get in touch with some local community colleges about maybe borrowing their lab for a day or two and get some experts together. We'll put the word out if we ever get it organized. But we're wondering if that would be something people were interested in. Our local area seemed like that would be a good use of a workshop because grasses are pretty tough and a lot of us are not familiar with some of the distinctions. We're wondering if anyone else might be interested in that. Hello? Hello?
Hey Ryan, I can hear you. But yeah, grass ID workshops generally are a big hit with local CISMA groups. It just depends on your audience and participants.
Okay, yeah, and I guess we've never put anything together like that, so we were also hoping for maybe suggestions about how one might go about doing such a thing.
I know the Central Florida CISMA has done it. Has put them together. We did one down at Treasure Coast, and we invited a local professor from SAU, and he basically ran the day for us. We did half in a classroom and then half in the field.
Okay.
And tried to look at like simple ways to identify grasses in the field.
Cool. Okay. So that's about all I had for us. Sorry, I wasn't quite as prepared. I'm sure Bob had a little bit more ready to talk about, but
Okay, great. No problem. That was a great update. And I know too, I'll just add in that, yeah, I agree. Grass ID workshops are always a great resource for folks and usually really well attended because grasses are one of the bigger challenges in the plant families. And also, Ryan, I can follow up with you on the workshop development and maybe connect you with the folks that were mentioned, some pointers and ways to get started on that effort for the workshop.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, all right, so moving on. Shout outs. So I'm still getting up to speed and in the know with everything great that's going on in the state. So I always just want to give that shout out to everybody, to everyone on this call and all your partners who are just out there doing the work, especially now that we're getting into the summer months. I hope everyone is staying cool and hydrated, especially if you're out in the field right now. But I want to give a shout out to the University of the University of Georgia Center for Invasive Species and Ecosystem Health. Many of you might know it as Bugwood. That's kind of how I always refer to it. You may or may not be aware that they actually have hosted the FISP and CISMA websites from the beginning. It's a huge service, and they do that for a lot of other partners as well. And this kind of speaks to Ryan. So we are actually working with them right now for a big website update for the Florida Invasive Species Partnership website and the CISMA sites, which will hopefully just increase the usability and the user friendliness of the sites overall. So we will work with the CISMAs as we get those sites updated, and hopefully they'll be easier for you to interact with as well. And then, of course, we have to mention that they are the host and the creator of the EdMaps platform, which is used across the country, and just basically, great partners for us in Florida and nationwide. So big thanks to them for all the work that they're doing. Next month's call, just real quick, we will have a presentation on tegus in Florida. Always fun to hear about some new herps spreading and moving about, and get an update from North Central Florida CISMA. So that'll be on July 21:30. And then our 5-month call schedule. So we're working through this into the fall. Do you see any good presentations on there? And soon we will be setting up our next schedule for January through May 2019. So if you've seen any great presentations or there's anything you want to hear more about, please always feel free to shoot me a recommendation or a presenter that you might be interested in having on a call. And then I'm going to try this. Let's see, it's my first time, so I'm going to launch this poll, and hopefully you are seeing a poll and can answer these 2 questions really quickly for me. There we go. So somebody responded, so I think you're seeing it. So I'll just give you a few minutes to put your input on that. Okay, great. So it looks like most people have responded. So thank you for taking a moment to do that for us. I'm going to close that. And let's see, hopefully you're seeing my slides again. So this is the first time. So I think that's it for today. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Just a reminder that we do this once a month. It never lasts more than an hour. And you can join the CISMA listserv there at that link below to make sure you get the announcements for the calls. And again, I will share the link to find these online after the fact so that you can go back and refresh information and listen to that GRAS ID description over and over again until you've got it memorized. So thanks again for joining today, and I look forward to talking to everybody again next month.